made
There they
it.
are.
Oh my gosh, there they are.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Hi. Hi, Julianne.
Hi, Angelo.
Ah.
I love you. It's been so long. Hi, Michelle.
What's up, Amon?
Good morning to you guys. Nice to see you all.
All right, all right.
This is a great intro because I think that's where Julianne was taking us. Angelo, Michelle, tell us who you are, what you're known as, what you're known for, and why you're here today.
Yeah, and if we could do that with everybody, that'd be awesome.
Actually,
Okay,
Jules.
well, in the ether dimension, we're Marilyn Negro and Dr. Mad Vibe. But here on Earth, my name is Angelo Moore, and that's Michelle Harper.
There they are.
Who are you? What do you do? I mean, that is who you are. What do you do? What are you known for? Just a little bit, because I know it's a long story.
You go first, Michelle.
I'm known as Angelo's slave and his babysitter.
Not lying.
That's right, indentured.
Yes, but before I met Angelo, before I met him, I have a long history in the beauty and fashion industry. I was an early adapter, so I owned my own fashion company. I started at age 21 and it grew international hosiery company called Look From London Hosiery. I guess that's one of my biggest achievements. And it was sold all over the world. And so I was a very much early adapter in the fashion industry and probably I was known as one of the first African-American hosiery designers on that level. And then I went on to become a stylist and a personal shopper. And I worked at Bergdorf Goodman, and I worked, very high-end fashion as well as beauty lines, Giorgio Armani, as well as some spa lines from out of France and things like that. And then I kind of got burnt out helping rich people. How many $3,500 dresses can you sell? And Bergdorf Goodman, right? etc. And, I just got really burnt out on just that energy of just working with people like that. And my daughter went to Cal Arts here in Los Angeles. I met Angelo and I decided to move to Los Angeles. And then I went through a personal identity crisis and I was like, oh my goodness, why would I want to work in fashion in California? Because I had already done everything at the height of fashion and full speed ahead. I'm now a hypnotherapist and an energy healer. But throughout my whole fashion career and beauty career, I was also working in energy healing and esoteric studies. And now I'm full-fledged licensed. I am a licensed esthetician. I've been one since 1983 while I was doing all those other things. But I also now am as a clinical hypnotherapist, and I do Reiki and color therapy and sound healing. So that's where I am now. And then I also help Angelo with all the things that no one else helps him with.
That was a really good way of putting it. Michelle, I've liked you since the day I met you.
Oh, same here.
Good quality people, and I like that you have some variety to who you are and how you get there. And then there's Angelo.
Yeah,
I can't wait to hear this one. So he had you go first because he wanted to figure out how are we doing this. And
Yeah, that's right. Ladies first here.
Yeah. Smart man.
So, right, okay. Oh, shit. All right, so first of all, you know what I think? I think that if we put this back here.
Yeah, can you tilt down a little, actually? Do you mind?
Okay, and then you can see.
Whole thing. Oh, wow.
Now you can see a little bit below.
Yeah.
Just, the bobbling
Yeah,
head
it was getting a little too heady.
So I'm the front man, lead singer of Fishbone ever since 1979. Black rock, reggae, funk, ska. Legendary rock star and all that shit. I play my first instrument is a saxophone. alto, then tenor, and then bass saxophone, baritone, bass saxophone, baritone, tenor, alto, soprano. I play the organ, piano, I play the theremin, play percussion. I'm a music arranger. I'm also a poet and a writer. My alias is Dr. Mad Vibe, comprehensive linkologist, the missing link you need in your chain of life. Modern day Sun Ra. Got out a couple of books.
Musical Basquiat.
Yeah, musical Basquiat, all that. I have a couple of projects going on. I got this one project called A Brand New Step. We're on our second album. We have several videos. You can check out the website, thebrandnewstep.com. We just redid it. It looks really good. And then I have this other group called The Missing Links, which is we redid my CD called The Angelo Show, which I did off of Kickstarter. And I have another project that I did called Project Infidelica with George Lynch from Doc and Pancho Tomaselli. Yeah, metal, funk. It's got some reggae in there. It's got some blues. And I collaborated with George Lynch from Doc and Pancho Tomaselli, bass player from War, and the drummer from Sammy Hagar, Christopher Moore. I also have done a lot of David Bowie celebration tours in Europe and Japan and South America.
And you've done a lot.
Yeah, I've done a lot, man. It's kind of hard for me to just.
You're like a lifelong musician.
Yeah.
Yeah, my whole career has been I've been self-supported, other than Fishbone, a self-supported musician and artist ever since 1979.
And one of your slogans being, I put this up today. Can you see in the background?
Yeah.
Fuck racism.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can't see it, but yeah, the slogan is fuck racism. Hold on.
I don't know how many slogans Angelo has, but I think he probably is just a slogan creator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The little bit of time I spent around Angelo, I'm like, this brother is deep.
Yeah.
Layers upon layers upon layers.
Yeah.
There's the flag.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yep. Shirts. I remember being in high school and everybody was wearing these shirts. So it was a good thing for all of us in suburban San Ramon, which I know Ahmed and Marlene know. And
Yeah.
Yeah, so
That's your segue, Marlene.
I know, Marlene. Here we go.
It's so nice to be surrounded by so many talented people. You know, I think we all have our talents, and certainly yours are just tremendously long, and I was fascinated by listening. Well, I started out in Oakland, California. My dad was an award-winning optometrist and struggled his way through, as Maud said to me some months back, that, you know, he found out he was Black when he got to Oakland. And
he found out he was Black when he got to Oakland.
That's what I found out. I was Black. I'll tell you about it because I didn't start off in Oakland.
Ahmad didn't know that until he got to Oakland. And we know who taught him that. But, you know, the Oakland experience was my grandparents as well as my parents. And so my dad, as I was telling Julianne, that my dad graduated from Oakland Technical High School, selected his speech as the speech for the valedictorian, and then denied him the title because he was Black. So, you know, from there he went on to Cal, and it was a series of wonderful adventures for him that I was incorporated into as a child. And he started VSP Global, and was a first among many African Americans, which led a path for me because I could see what he was going through.
Your dad was a Black celebrity in my eyes. He's one of those prominent figures in history. Because when I first met Marlene, I was like, who is this Marlene and Bob Bell? And I kept thinking it was Bob. I was like, maybe Bob is like Angelo. Maybe he's some old musician or something, and now he owns a ranch. And I'm like, oh, it was Marlene's dad. Who was?
Wait, what's your father's name again, Marlene?
Marvin Poston. Poston, Poston.
Look him up.
And he had an optometric practice on Broadway in Oakland for 40 years and was president of the California Optometric Association, Alameda County Optometric Association. And I shadowed him every step of the way on that, learned an awful lot, but was not about to go into optometry. It's hard to walk in somebody's shadow. So you got to make your own, you got to make your own way.
Yeah, you got to make your own way, right.
You got to make your own way and make that your tower of whatever expertise you want to shine in. And so I went into education and I went to UC Davis, graduated from UC Davis, and went into education and spent 27 years in the classroom. And part of those 27 years, I was a national trainer on diversity and equity in education opportunity, especially for children of color. I went from there, I'm going to give you the short story. I went from there to become an organizer at the local level as a union organizer. And some of the same things I see in terms of racism, we see in terms of classism when it comes to teachers. And so the way we handle that is through contract language. And so I became an organizer in Davis and organized the first strike buildup with 94% of the teachers ready to go and 90% of the parents saying, we're standing behind you. Now that, for a little white town of Davis, was huge. And I was the strike organizer. And so I went from there to be staff for the California Teachers Association, and then spent a good number of years as the assistant executive director for Region 2, which is 30 of California's 58 counties. It's about a 73,000 square mile territory, runs from the Oregon border to the LA County line, and from Davis to the Nevada state line. So it was a big territory, much bigger class size, many more issues. One of them being political organizing, and the other as far as contract language and equity issues and finance issues in education. And following that, I retired 10 years ago, but I went right back to work on the curriculum side of the organization, heading up a program that taught algebra to elementary students. And our philosophy followed African-American fellow, and I'm going to lose his name right now, who wrote the Algebra Project, and he was an organizer with Martin Luther King. Hmm. And that program taught algebra to students at the concrete level, so they understood the meaning behind algebra before they were asked to memorize symbols and formulas. And so we had kids who were in the 3rd grade, up and down the region, who were doing the Algebra Success Academy.
Which I still haven't learned today.
There's still time, Marlene.
There's still time. There's still time. You do it every day, Ahmad.
One thing at a time, though. Marlene, really, I invited her.
And so now I'm retired, but I'm not totally retired, because none of us ever totally retired. We're engaged in something, whether it be economically or otherwise. And I have 2 ventures, one with my husband and one separately. I own a building in downtown Oakland that I manage. And the last riots and demonstrations went from 10th Street on Broadway past our building all the way to 29th Street. Our building was not touched until the 3rd night of demonstrating. It didn't bother me. Everything is fixable. And so, and then the other venture I have is I'm a walnut farmer. Oh. And so we have 20 acres of walnuts, and a learning experience in and of itself every season. I've just done a study on the soil and water here on the land and found out that we had a high alkalinity in our water. So we've just installed a piece of equipment that will balance the acidity and the alkalinity of the water so that everything you put into the trees actually works. Fertilizer.
Wow, that is awesome.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Actually.
Wow.
So Marlene
Very cool.
Marlene is a client of mine. I don't help with the walnut orchard, but I help with her personal home that's on her little ranch there.
And who are you?
Oh, my name is still Ahmed Hassan. I'm still a 46-year-old black man until September, where I'll be 47. And
All right.
I happen to be a landscape professional, a green industry expert, as they call me, and a black man with an Arab name because my parents were living in California through the 60s. And my dad went and had a short vacation of 6 years over in San Quentin Penitentiary. And he was one of those black men that went into prison a hood rat and came out a Muslim. So
I was just gonna ask, does that mean you're a Muslim?
right. if I wanted to claim that, I was born understanding and exposed to the Nation of Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism and Christianity, and I most subscribe to religious science if I have to claim any religion, because I can go to any church of religious science and eat everything on the menu.
And get everything right, yeah.
You know, that's who I am. But ultimately, I'm a landscape professional. I'm a father of 3 kids, and there's many other kids that show up in my path because I'll play father to them. And I'm a person who has lived my life probably more so in the white community than I have in the black community. I've had both, but I currently reside in Cameron Park, California, which is very white and very right. And it works for me. One of the first things my mom said when I told her I was moving to Cameron Park, she was like, "Are there any black folks in Cameron Park?" I said, "No, Mom, you know, I'm the one." I go in, I live amongst the white people, I show them that we're all the same, and then all y'all come on up the hill. So
That's what you call a fly in the buttermilk, man.
it's kind of been the story of my life. It's why
Yes.
I know people like Julianne, and it's how I relate to people like Marlene, who lives in Winters, California, because I lived there too, and it's not known for its black community.
Okay.
And her daughter, Marlene's daughter, and I actually went to the same elementary school in Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I was like one of the black families, and she was one of the black families, even though her daughter is probably lighter than Marlene, so nobody really knows what she is. She just has a big old fro. And then there was like one other family, and that was it. So we had some common ground there. But the reason I think that we're all here is because I also grew up with Julianne for a time as a child and met her sister Joelle. And now these gals have this podcast. And of recent, I've been sharing back and forth with Julianne.
Wait. Did you just say her sister Joelle?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that is your sister.
That's why they look the same.
That's why y'all look alike, because it is your actual sister.
Yeah, that's
I
her.
wasn't
That's her
totally
only-
off the mark.
Her only actual sister.
Oh, God, Angela is always late to the party. She's not recording at the party.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Angela. I'm the big sister. I live down in San Diego, and I have 3 kids. And yeah, so she's my baby sister.
Yeah.
I can see when you smiled. It's okay. I see it right there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Bam. There it is.
Those two
Okay,
in the
right.
and they all look the same.
Everything's
Yeah.
coming together. Everything's coming together.
Well, you know what, Ahmad? I grew up in a white neighborhood, man. Flying the buttermilk, Woodland Hills. My family was one of the first black families in Woodland Hills, California, man. So,
Yeah, and then Julianne was saying you were bussed out of Woodland Hills over to the black community as a kid.
no,
No.
the rest of my
Lied.
band, Fishbone,
band.
was bused out of inner city Los Angeles in the busing program out to Woodland Hills.
Sorry.
Mm.
I got that
I'm
wrong.
trying to
Sorry.
integrate.
Well, see, that's there again lies the benefit of this conversation, because I started out in an all-white neighborhood and have been living in all-white schools my whole life, like Ahmad.
Yeah.
And Oakland Hills being the beginning of that,
Mm.
and indelible on my mind.
Mm.
as an adult.
Yeah, because people that don't know Oakland and don't really have familiarity with Oakland think that Oakland isn't a Black community. When I first got to Oakland, I was like, oh my God, there's a lot of Asian people here. I never knew. And the Oakland Hills in particular, especially when you were a child, I can imagine that was not Black at all.
No, as a matter of fact, that was when my dad had to double deed the purchase of our home up in the hills through a Jewish friend. And so his friend would buy the property with his cash, deed it back to him. And the interesting thing is, in 1990, he did the same thing in the Napa Valley. He was the first Black vintner in the Napa Valley purchasing land by double deeding it through friends, white friends.
The only way to get in there.
The only way to get in there, right.
If you guys were raised more in the white community, did you experience, like, this conversation is sort of off the tails of George Floyd and wanting to have open dialogue? Just wondering what your experience was then growing up. Did you experience
I can tell you
racism
I can tell you the very first day of kindergarten for me, and one of the reasons why I became a teacher. I walked into class with my mother like all the other kids. A lot of kids were crying because mom's walking out the door. And my experience was, well, children were led off to a different activity other than focusing on mine. As the teacher led me over to the paint station, she took me by the upper arm, squeezed it to the bone, and said, "Wouldn't you like to paint?" And I knew right then and there where I stood in that classroom as a 5-year-old.
The teacher did this to you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So you see, the racism I experienced in all white settings went from there to being spat on and all kinds of other stuff. But I had to endure because that was my school.
And where was this at again?
Well, my kindergarten experience was in Oakland.
Oh, in Oakland, California.
Right, in Oakland. We moved for a period of time up to Victoria, British Columbia. Wasn't as bad there. You know, you could survive pretty well because they did not have African Americans as their lowest level of elitism in that community. The Native American was the lowest level of
on the social totem pole, right? The Indian,
on the social totem pole, that's right. And so I managed to get a step above that. So I was not as much a target, but very much a target when I went back to the San Ramon Valley to Danville. And in Danville, that's where I got to get spit on for being African American in their classroom.
And that's where
and you call it Damville.
It still is.
See, and I'm kind of ashamed, and not ashamed, but this is, I'm going to sound dumb in a lot of things I say, but we grew up in San Ramon right next to Danville, and I experienced feeling like we didn't have a whole lot of culture there at all. And I hit 16, 17, and I went and lived in Berkeley and Oakland for years, but because I wanted that diversity, but it was very, very, very white. Huh?
And I said, you haven't been back ever since, because
I've never been back. True.
I know. And then I grew up, obviously in the same spot. And then I'm kind of repeating the same thing with where I live now. I live in San Diego in a super white suburban area with my 3 kids who have, 2 or 3 Black friends, and that's about it. And we have a couple families we're friends with, but, not super close with. So I want to do better for the next generation and be more inclusive. And we're kind of feeling like, I guess that thing, white guilt, white fragility, everybody's talking about, but we want to have this platform so we can talk about it and figure out if there's, feelings and what people can do to help the cause and make things better.
That's good. That's good. Cause sometimes I forget because I keep myself in a bubble the majority of the time. I would rather consider myself not of this world than am. That's how I keep my art pure and my music pure and all that shit. So, you know, I know it's a lot of racism out there and everything, but because I've been so used to it, you know, and I grew up getting chased by rednecks in my, you know, Woodland Hills on the way home from the bus and all the rest of that, you know, and all that type of shit. And I ended up I ended up hating white people. Some good music came out of it, some good lyrics. I embraced the punk rock culture because the punk rock culture was a part of the white culture that just hated everybody.
Right.
Especially white corporates.
They give them a choice but to like him. Yeah.
So I embraced a lot of that, you know, a lot of the corporate culture and everything. They never really looked my way, but a lot of the underground culture did. The black culture was always underground anyway.
Had to be.
But all the white boys and everything, you know, out of my neighborhood, all the punk rock that was there, it just gave me a reason to hate white people right along with the white people that hated white people too. So I was like, hell, man, this is
my people.
Yeah, these are my people, you know, right along. And a lot of black people ended up like when it came to me putting my music out and everything, a lot of black people didn't embrace a lot of rock because they felt like it was just white boy music. They call it stringy hair white boy music, and we can't relate to that shit. And oh, nigga, you just selling out. Right. You know, you just Uncle Tom and shit like that. But I'm like, no, actually, this is like black. This is like all derived from black music. And so when my own black people couldn't embrace what I was doing, even in my own household, aside from Richard Pryor, Red Fox, Flip Wilson, the closest thing to rock that my family got to was Jimi Hendrix.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the closest thing to rock that my family embraced. Other than that, and the Doors, right? But when it got to be a little outside of the Doors, and Buddy Rich, no, I said it right, but the drummer Buddy Rich, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Once it got outside of that, it's like, oh, Angelo, that punk rock shit, you need to, you know, that's, you know, we can't, that's just some noisy shit. I'm just like, well, okay.
That's interesting.
Was, you know, and so that's where, so, but a lot of, other than that, I've realized that I keep forgetting that a lot of white people don't realize that the racism is here. And, you know, this is something I was saying the other day on my show. The reason why we have a lot of white privilege, and it's some of the last things that people would think about. We have a lot of white privilege because of this.
That's right.
This guy on the front, right? This white man doesn't look anything like my granddad whatsoever. If anything, he looks like my oppressor, okay? Yes. So white people on a subliminal, subconscious level feel comfort when they pull this out and they buy they food, they rent, they buy everything in the matrix that was designed by guys that look like this, that we live in this matrix that we live in, right? This provides white privilege to exist.
In and of itself.
There's no Indian face on here. There ain't no Latino face on here, and there ain't no black face on here. So
well, you know the one black face that could have been on there was delayed until after the Trump presidency has ended.
Yeah, Harriet Tubman.
Yeah, Harriet Tubman, right.
So
in the one Indian face on the Indian head on the Indian penny, I forget her name, but she was didn't she squeal on her own tribe? I can forget her name, but
was that Sacagawea?
Yeah, I think
yeah.
so.
I don't remember.
Because Harriet Tubman,
right? I'm
Harriet Tubman had a hairdo that looked kind of like you and Michelle's. I was just noticing that. I got
Paying homage.
So I think my experience is probably different from everyone. So I'm from Baltimore. So Baltimore is from the Black community. You know, I grew up
an affluent Black community.
Well, it's all mixed up. So my parents and my grandmother was a minister. She had 2 minister husbands. On my father's side, my mother's side. So I come from a religious background, and grew up in the Black church. You know, so I pretty much grew up around lots of Black people, Southern Black people. You know, very kind, very humble. You know, not elite, just basic working class people. And I went to school. I was a very talented I'll start with this. So my dad, when I was 4 years old, he was shot and he became paralyzed on one side. He died in his 60s, but I was about 4 years old. And so I was very artistic, and my dad was going through rehabilitation. So I did a lot of art. So I always had an inner world, probably unlike a lot of my peers, because I spent a lot of time doing art, so I was very creative. So when I went to school, my teachers noticed that I was really creative, and I was very mature because I pretty much grew up with my dad because he was learning how to read and write, could read really early. So that gave me a kind of advantage point in school. And so I was always with the teachers. So my whole high school, my elementary school, middle school, and high school was always kind of like a teacher's pet. People that went to school with me, they said she was in our class, but she was never with us because I don't even remember people that I went to school with. So with that said, I went to school with you. I'm like, really? And it's weird because I don't remember. I don't go to class reunions or any of that stuff because I don't really know any of those people. And it's kind of a weird upbringing. But all that to say, so I always had an elevated sense of self, and I was able to participate in programs where I was the only Black person most of my life. I went to college. I was like, you know, I had white friends, you know, like kind of like just everybody was artistic and creative. So I grew up in a very creative community. And so fast forward, I didn't feel limited because I never felt limited growing up because I was exposed to a different kind of upbringing. Yeah. And at the time it was punk rock, you know, and so I always felt like an outsider, even amongst my peers, even amongst Black kids, because they used to laugh at me because I was so creative and I walked a creative lifestyle. And so, and that's how I ended up starting a company. And I started a business when I was very young. And so, but where I felt racism the most is when I started going to trade shows when I started a business. And I realized that the only way I would get ahead in the fashion business, and this was based on a recommendation, was to say that my business was owned by a Jewish person. So I was 22 years old, and I started a company, and I had to fill out a Dun & Bradstreet form. And I put down that it was owned by Edith and Ira Bergman. Wow. And they lived in Australia.
Very hard to find. Yes.
She said she was creative.
Yeah.
She is.
Yeah. And so from that point on, so I had a showroom on Fifth Avenue. I rented a space, and so the Hasidic Jews used to come to my office like at least once a week and send me things about coming to the temple. And sometimes they would actually physically knock on the door. Hi, we're wondering if Edith and Ira are here. We've never seen them at the temple. And I'm like, oh no, they're in Australia. They travel all the time. I just work for them.
Oh my God.
For many years, this business lasted for 28 years. And so for many, many years, I was the salesperson. and no one knew that I owned the company. And
Your
people, and I would
story's not
show
that
up.
unique either.
Huh?
That story is
Uh-huh.
very common.
Yeah, exactly. And
Hiding
so,
behind in trying to get ahead and knowing that I'm not going to be accepted as a person of color, as a Black person.
oh yeah,
Color is very vague.
exactly.
Can I ask you this, because this was brought up, I think it was Vaughn Jones was bringing up that, or no, it was Camus Bell saying that our country still is run by white supremacy,
Absolutely.
which is
Mhm.
confused with white supremacist, which a lot of white people get that confused. Do you agree with that?
I think it's both. I think this country has always run on white supremacy. And we have all lived that, learned how to move around it to a certain extent. But it is also run by white supremacists. And whether you call it a person who holds on to title and privilege and doesn't recognize the issues of diversity and inclusion,
Take that
but
off.
maintain the
That's
status
good.
quo, you are now a country, because of who our leadership is, past and present. We are a country that has been run on the principles of white supremacy. And that's why you're seeing people in the street now. They're finally getting it. My problem is, are you going to keep getting it? We've gotten it before. We can go back to Rodney King. We can go back to lynchings. We can go back to all kinds of horrific conditions that cause people outrage. We can go back to the civil rights movement, where we were beaten in the street, hosed down. Are they going to keep getting it? And will they show up and vote? Do they understand the value of democracy? They want change. We all want change.
And is the voting, when people vote, because see, we can vote all we want, right?
Is it going to count?
Is it going to count once it gets there?
That's right. Is it
And
going to
that's
count?
when, and you know, I think that, I don't like to be negative, man, but I just don't think it's going to count when it gets there, because it's in somebody else's hands that regular people don't have access to. You know, we can't touch, see, or talk to the person that is actually in charge of the person that's running the votes and making the decisions at the end.
Yeah, I would imagine the feeling is one of distrust. There's no trust in the system. There's no trust in people with power based on history, based on what's going on now. So that's hard for hope. That's hard to have hope in that system.
I think that we're going to see change, and we're already seeing change. You know, there's now this movement to defund the police department. I don't see a parallel movement to ban assault rifles, and we can't get a bill to ban lynching through the Senate. Now go figure.
Really?
Go figure.
Why is that? What is going on there?
You have people who have one person held it up, was allowed to hold it up, and that was Rand Paul. He felt it was too broad.
Say that one more time. I missed it.
There was one person that held it up. It was Rand Paul. He felt that the language was too broad. They're arguing over the language. Okay, we argue over language all the time because language is important. It describes intent and it defines parameters. But one senator is holding this thing up, but there's more than one senator. 410 members of Congress approved the language and went to the Senate.
The language of, you mean the word lynching?
Yeah, lynching, because there's a whole
anti-lynching language. We do not have a law against lynching in this country still.
There's no law against lynching. Well, yeah, there ain't no law against lynching because this shit keeps happening.
But you see, there's different kinds of ways to lynch somebody.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's the overt and the covert.
Which is what just happened. Oh, sorry.
Which is exactly what happened. That man put his knee on George Floyd's neck and lynched him. with
and
full
lynched
intent.
him. It didn't
Well,
have to
full-
happen. It didn't
and
have to
his-
happen with a
Because
rope,
it's-
and it
because
was
this is it.
posing,
That's a homicide.
posing while he did it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so lynching is okay in this country, and that's why we've never been able to get language through the Senate or the House ever. Never mind who was in place, who held it up. Never got to the president's desk because they approve lynching. So now what you're seeing on the street is you've had for centuries people who identify themselves as law enforcement and those who are hired as law enforcement to lynch Black people in a number of ways. Institutionalized racism has lynched too many Black people, either because they lost their job or they had a glass ceiling put on top of them. Their opportunity stunted because of the color of their skin. And so now we've got people talking about defunding the police department. You can't throw out people with good intention and who operate in an honest, trustworthy, ethical manner, but you do need to take
Most
care
police
of
do.
the community.
Most police do.
Well, because you know why? It's their contract language. And I've negotiated many a teacher contract, but we don't have any contract language that says you are protected against the molestation of children. And the union does not protect a teacher who is accused of touching a child inappropriately. And they will send you to an appropriate attorney. And if you're acquitted, okay, acquitted, then they will reimburse your legal expenses, but we don't pay legal expenses to protect teachers from inappropriate action. Police departments' language does. It protects them. That's why you don't see tape recordings, body camera tape recordings, or vocal or verbal tape recordings, 911 released, because their contract says they're not releasing it. They'll release what they want to. They're to protect that officer.
And you know, Van Jones was talking,
That's
he's the
wrong.
attorney, and he was talking
I'm
about
trying to change that now.
it's a gang. Being a cop, you can't sue a cop individually. And once they join the force, basically they're part of a gang, and that gang is going to back each other up.
And
So there's no accountability.
And it's called an injury to one is an injury to all. Well, the same thing now applies for African Americans. You have injured and killed and lynched George Floyd. And we have seen, through benefit of technology, people recording this over and over again. You can't kill Black folks or white folks without consequence. But the problem is it's disproportionate. You look who's sitting in prison, you know how much leverage cops have to kill or lynch or stunt someone's life. And I think people have seen enough, but being cooped up with a pandemic only helps. It only helps because it's focused.
Yeah, and it was something about this video too. I was hearing different people talk about it, that the framing of it, like seeing his face looking right into the camera with his hands in his pockets, and then seeing George's face right there on the ground calling for his mom. I mean, just almost cinematically, maybe it's the movie industry or something, but something about that video and all of us being at home and seeing it over and over.
And you know what? When I look at the fact that Chauvin, right, had his hands in his pocket and he's posing, right? No matter how much of a psychopath you are,
it was a statement.
He knew that the camera was on him. How could you not know that the camera was on you? So he knew what was happening, and yeah, it was a statement. He knew what was going on. It's like this is what's happening, and we can do this, and it's okay.
But he had 18 complaints of excessive force filed against him.
I want to ask a question.
Oh, before that.
I want to ask a question. I want to ask a question, Angelo. I want to ask a question, Michelle, and I want to ask a question, Marlene, because I'm asking you because I want your Black opinion. He knew he could get away with it because of what, Angelo?
Because of his white privilege.
That's right.
Michelle,
he knew he could get
why did Chauvin know he could get away with it?
For me,
Yeah, Marlene.
Okay. He knew he could get away with it because he was protected by his contract. He was protected by city leaders. He was protected by his race. Bottom line, this man knew he could get away with it because he had already gotten away with it. He had 18 complaints of excessive force already on his record. He should never have been a cop. He shouldn't have been still working. He was involved in 5 deaths of different people under his custody.
Okay, same question from Michelle. Why do you think he felt he could get away with it? Why would a person, knowing that you have a camera at you, several cameras at you, what do you suppose, and we're all just guessing, but why do you suppose, Michelle, that he felt like, I'm still going to do this?
The whole time that I'm listening to all of this and we're talking about white supremacy, you know, I'm also thinking about how, just like the woman who could call the cops on the guy in the park and just have hysterics about the guy touching her, just like Emmett Till was dragged through the city because a white girl was killed and he was blamed for that. You know, it feels like that white people have a history of being able to get out of situations where they're blatantly, you know, are accusing a Black person of something that they didn't do, but they know that they're going to be more trusted than the Black person or the Black voice, no matter what. It's like their voice has more power than the person of color. And so,
but here's the thing I want to get to you, Michelle, and you might not, Marlene, you might not even know this. You can get away with that when it's a Black man, especially.
Yes.
Because Black men in particular, Angelo over me, simply because of the complexion of his skin, is considered more dangerous.
That's right.
Angelo over me is going to be dealt with differently than
Very differently. Yes.
That's what's plain, and it's true, and it's known in the Black community.
Right.
And apparently some in the white community know this, others might not. And I think that's what all of this fuss is being about. It's not about George Floyd. Nobody's saying George Floyd was a role model citizen.
No.
We're saying he didn't deserve to die, and he was killed, and it was made okay by Chauvin and all of his accomplices, his brotherhood, because, this is a crazy Black man.
Yeah.
We could probably get away with this shit.
But you have Tamir Rice, who was treated the same way. A camera on him. But you also have George Swimmy, who was 14, accused of murdering a white girl and electrocuted.
Yep.
And just 5 years ago,
He
found that he was innocent.
Because it's, you know, trust and survival.
Yes.
It's all about the trust issue. And here throughout the world, the color of your skin means you can't be trusted.
That's right.
Your voice, you don't have a voice, and you can't be trusted because you're darker, you're browner. And that's the thing. If you are a person of color, they don't hear what you're saying. They don't believe what you're saying, because the first thing people see is the color of your skin. And you're judged by that immediately when you walk in the room, immediately when you get on the bus, immediately when you go in the store. You're like, oh, here comes somebody brown, here comes someone Black. Okay, we can't trust them because they're untrustworthy. And so I better watch them closely because that person is not trustworthy. They have the ability, but you know what? But I was saying in terms of my practice in, metaphysics, etc., that is the trust issues. That's the basis of all of this. And I really believe a lot of it is based on guilt. Of course, you're not going to trust a person that you have you strip them of all their rights. You've been mean to them. It's like a dog. You're going to treat a dog bad, and then you're going to say, hell, come on and play with me. After you've starved the dog, kicked the dog, you got the dog locked up And then all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh, well, you know what? You're kind of cute. I'm going to let you off the leash.
That dog is going to be like, oh, no.
And so there's that fear of the guilt
Yeah.
of just being mean and horrible to people of color. And now all of a sudden, you know, oh, they're free now. Ooh, oh, I don't know. I know, you know, my family has a history of being horrible to Black people. You know, and what I believe that the children, that now with technology and music and everything, that we're all in a melting pot and we can see that everyone is the same. This is why the protests, you know, includes a lot of diversity, because the kids, I mean, I lived in New York most of my life. You know, my daughter grew up in New York. She has lots of white friends. It's to the point where she had mostly all white friends at one point. And I was like, you don't have any Black friends. But they don't look at each other that way now. The younger people they're more open-minded, and they know that their friends are their friends. They have more trust amongst themselves. Whereas the older generation, they've done so much harm in the guise of colorism. You know, they've been so judgmental based on colorism that now they're fearful.
Right.
You know, and this
Can I ask you, Michelle, because, you know, we're kind of more in the city. We're in LA. I lived in New York and Oakland, and I feel like there was a little more of the integration, and that a lot of my friends, they didn't see the color issues as much in that way. That if you are, you know, Joelle was talking about being in Poway or a community that's, you know, a little more removed from a lot of culture, how there were a lot of people asking questions and calling in for today saying, I want to expose my son or daughter, and they're more our age, maybe not the millennials, but how would Joelle help to integrate culture for her kids being in a real white community and for a lot of other people?
The great thing about it is it's easier now because you have media. You got movies. Oh my God, movies. You got books. I mean, the movies that are out now are just really telling so many stories.
My daughter is 8 years old. At last Halloween, she wanted to go as the princess for Black Panther. So I bought her the costume. I'm like, go girl, that's awesome. But then, you know, there was a movement saying white people aren't allowed to dress up like a Black character. You know, even though she was just wearing the clothes, there's no.
And your daughter didn't understand. She didn't understand.
Yeah.
No, she didn't understand at all, but I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want to like post pictures on Facebook and have everybody come down on me. So we scrapped the outfit. She wears it for dress up at home, but she can't wear it out for Halloween. So, you know.
Did you have the conversation with her around it, or did you just have to kind of mom it?
Yeah, at the time she was a little younger. So I just kind of, you know, said, well, why don't we have something? But now we're having the conversations. Now being in 3rd grade, I feel like she can get it a little bit better. And she's just, I mean, her poor little eyes, she's like, why is everybody so mad? I don't understand. Didn't this end in the 1800s?
Right.
I mean, what they teach them in
Right.
what they teach them in schools. Martin Luther King fixed it. You know, Abraham Lincoln fixed it. Barack Obama came along, everything's fixed.
Right.
So that's the number one problem. Barack Obama. There goes the fear.
I cried. I thought it was fixed too.
Damn.
It just took the sheet off of it. They were like, oh,
we're good now.
Yeah,
we're good now.
And
Yeah,
and then you get Trump.
That's why we got Trump. It's why we got Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was the backlash for having Barack Obama.
Yep.
And I will tell one of the things that I've noticed though, and when you were talking about the white supremacy that we live in, the TV show Cops, what is that all about? Watch that show. You can't watch it anymore. Not unless it's on Netflix and you can binge watch it. But if you look at it, it's all about what Black folks getting arrested.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. 80-90% of everybody that shows up on a cop camera for that show. But you know what? They took that show off the air this week.
This
they took
week.
it off the air. It's a good thing because it's nothing more than demonstrating the lynching that Black folks have been getting from police for years.
Black folks and Latinos, man.
Right.
And you know,
it's also a one-sided lynching show, which won't
Yes,
really
it is.
show the heinous crimes that are going down and being protested.
and you
That's
know
right.
what? When I start talking about this type of shit, you got black people and you got brown people, which are Latinos and Indians, right? And I think to myself, okay, but what about the Asians? Yellow people.
No.
People they seem like they're in the area where it's like in the neutral area. Because they don't really experience too much of that, and I'm just like, wow.
Yeah. Joelle and I were talking about that a minute ago. And it starts for them as children. They're perceived as being the smart ones.
Mm-hmm.
They're perceived as being the ones that will get ahead. They're perceived as being the ones who will make the sacrifice to get ahead, and they're quiet. So we mess with them a little bit, but not a whole lot. We're not thumping on them.
But once again, it's about the color.
That's right.
It's about colorism.
Yes,
and
it
that's
is.
the whole thing. Colorism is racism, because sometimes, like, okay, when I was in New York, I'm on the subway. That's why my name came up, Maryland Negro. And I was in the beauty industry for a long time. And so one day I'm on
Remember,
the
you
train.
made that name up.
No, it's my name. I created it because of this story. I'm on
Tell
the
them about the
train.
DMV too. You gotta tell them about that after you finish. Tell them about the DMV not doing
that.
that.
12,
that-
11, you got to decide how many
Okay.
stories you have, because
Yeah,
you're the one who has to know.
So I just want to tell you this part. So I'm on the train, and so New York, with everyone shaving their hair and people who have all different hairstyles, and and so I'm looking around on the train, and I see these women, and I know an Asian woman, she had like a black hairstyle, she had nails and everything. I saw this, and I worked in beauty, so Russian women, they had full lips, they got plastic surgery with butts and stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, everybody wants to look black. And then I was like, this is crazy. I'm like, I would never know the nationality of any of these women if I just looked, I would be like, I didn't know she was Russian. I didn't know she was Asian. I didn't know she was, and I was like, they're all Maryland Negroes. Glamour, the glamour of a black woman is like the mainstream, the mainstream standard of beauty. And then I was in the beauty industry, and I would see it all the time. Everybody, oh, how you get that butt? How you get this? Da, da, da. And I'm thinking, I was like, Maryland Negro, so why just be colored?
Do it in the butt. Sexy.
I'm like, why? I'm just thinking the standard of beauty has, and even Dorothy Dandridge said, everyone is admiring Marilyn Monroe, but Marilyn Monroe admires me. There's like a post where she says that. And, and she was very unhappy because she just couldn't get her place in society. However, that curvaceous, the full lips and all that stuff, that was, people would see that and they go, oh, but Black women were ostracized for it. Whereas, other nationalities were like, oh, I think I want to look like this. Anyway, so that's how it came with Maryland Negro, because of that, but all that to say, it's just that we, as a people, we're taught to not like ourselves, but everyone else is looking at us and admiring us. Like a comedian, this is an Asian guy, and I thought this was really funny. He said, I can't understand how Black people got captured in slavery. He said, you know what, I think it was because they weren't paying attention. He said,
motherfuckers had either eaten too much and they fell asleep at the goddamn couch. Next thing you know, they in jail or some shit.
He said, it's like a big old lion and a fly, and the fly came and be like, hey, you want to have some of this? Can I help you? Whatever. And the Black person was like, oh, just go away. And then finally, the Black person, who's a majestic, he's like, they have so many skills, they excel in sports, and they have all this, talent, raw talent. He says, how could they be caught in slavery like that? And he said it was because they weren't paying attention, and they got lazy, and they got over, but it's overconfident. And then the next thing they found themselves in the situation. And I thought that's so interesting, because when you look at athletes and this woman, her name is Mama Africa, she says, no matter how long we've been oppressed, we still rise above, and we're still here no matter how much people have tried to exterminate us. So understanding your magnificence, going back to Black Panther. And I believe that the Black Panther film has played a big part in the rise of Black nationalism and pride in the culture
and acceptance of it. And acceptance of it by other than Black folks, because it was put out as a movie that everybody could see. It wasn't
exactly.
It was a Black movie, but because it had that comic air to it,
yes,
it was relatable to everyone. It was enjoyable to everyone,
and it was the highest grossing film, like one of the world's most highest grossing films worldwide. Because one of my clients, she actually she was one of the marketers for the film. So, all that to say, I feel like change is coming, just like your daughter, 8 years old, she wanted to be a Black Panther. And then when we look at just the rise of just beauty standards and clothing standards, and, people are looking at that. And I mean, look at all the women on TV now wearing their natural hair. The news people. I'm like, what is going on? Everyone wants to look natural now. And so, with that said, there is a movement happening.
So what if her daughter had gone in that costume? What would be the feeling from the Black community?
If she lived in New York, it would be fine. It's just where you live. It's your town. Your daughter has like a more of a city mentality.
So should she, like in the future, should you just go for it and be the one to set the precedent?
If you're going to go for it and set the precedents, you got to prepare her for what she may come across, and she has to be able to answer to it like she would in any other situation. But she's got to have her own inner strength put together, and she also has to have her verbal response ready to go.
This is what I tell you. Know what? I tell the. Go ahead, Amon. Go ahead.
Okay. So Joelle, as someone who is aware of the Black community but doesn't have an intimate connection with it, has to also be able to. You got to do the same thing for your daughter that you want your daughter to have. So the same diversity you want to see in your daughter, you have to submerge yourself in that as well.
That's right.
No matter how uncomfortable it is, and the way you do that is by knowing what your intentions are.
Right. Let me show y'all something.
You talk to Black folks because you want to understand the intention, and you know where your heart is at. And it doesn't matter if you do something or say something that's offensive. When you give acknowledgement to that, and you know that your intentions were pure, then you change that. Because I've offended Asian people. I've offended white people. I've probably offended Black people, and never with any ill intention, which means I had to apologize and I had to correct some behavior. And that's normal. That's called just living life.
I always tell I've told my daughter, I tell Cheyenne, Cheyenne, if you're going to be wearing them skimpy clothes like that, and you're going to go out into the public, you got a little ass showing, you got your legs showing, you got some, you got your kind of boobies, bunched up and shit. Be ready. Get ready. Because you're going to have some men that are going to react in a natural way that men do. They're going to whistle. They're going to go, hey, girl.
Yep.
And so you have to be ready to how you're going to reply to that in an intelligent manner. Because just saying, fuck you, is only going to get the repercussion of a violent boomerang back at you. So you're gonna have you have to be extraordinary. You have to be able to react to that in an intelligent manner.
Yeah.
If you want to be you. And so that's the same thing. Like that just reminded me of what you were saying, Marlene, with your daughter, Joelle. How are you going to say, you can say, yeah, I don't see any color. But as a white person who might not feel the racism and you just want to be free, you have other people in your society, unfortunately, that aren't free under white society, and they feel the barriers, they feel the glass ceiling, they feel all of that. And so, how are you going to convince them that freedom is the way?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, look, I got a character here. This character is called a Caucasian ghetto flower.
Okay, he's showing
Now,
us.
the Caucasian ghetto flower is one of the characters out of my book.
Okay.
It's made out of this.
Can you hold it still, Angelo?
It's hard to see. It looks like a
focus. And then Angela, you have to talk so the microphone will get on your picture.
We'll get on my picture. So the Caucasian ghetto flower is the white girl right here in the middle. She's one of my characters in my story. She's called the Caucasian ghetto flower, right? She's the white girl in the middle of the black flower, the black flower cluster, which are all black flower sisters.
So it looks like a white girl in the middle, and the petals of the flower are.
And the petals of the flower are all black girls, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this character was made up of a girl named Christine Forbes. She played on my, she's a friend of mine. We collaborated musically, right? She lives in Baltimore. She lives right in the middle of a black neighborhood in Baltimore, right? It's the same. It's the opposite of flying a buttermilk. She's a snowflake in the tar pit. She's the whistleblower. She's homies with everybody because she lives there. She knows how to talk the language. She knows what's going on, right? Now, that what you're saying, Joelle, just reminded me of this right here, right? She would have to be a Caucasian ghetto flower, knowing the language, knowing the struggle, but at the same time, the Caucasian ghetto flower could automatically pick herself out of the black flower cluster and go to the land of Caucasia if she wanted to, and fit right in and not have to deal with none of that shit if she wanted to.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But she likes being a Caucasian ghetto flower in the middle of the ghetto, in the middle of Black Sisters, because she loves the culture, she likes the food, she likes the look, she likes the flavor, the music, everything.
Expose her to
I'm going to add to that because it's something relevant, and my bladder is telling me I got to get off this call very soon. The way to not be racist is to immerse yourself in all cultures and communities. Yes. That's how you're not be racist. It means go learn, go live, go eat with those folks, go eat their food. Take your kids to the Black community. You're like, well, what do we do in the Black community? You do the same thing you do in the white community. You go find something to eat. You go.
What's the lady's name that was the head of the NAACP? What was her name?
Oh, B. Smith?
No. We're talking about Rachel Rachel Dolezal.
Oh, NAACP.
Yeah, Rachel Dolezal.
I'm sorry.
Right, and she got a bunch of shit.
She was pretending to be a Black woman, but she was totally, Rachel Dolezal. They have a whole thing about her.
I remember that.
But man, she got so much shit for it, and I kept thinking to myself, why are these Black people giving her so much shit when she is in the position of
advocating for them,
for them, right, and killing it. She's killing it. She was doing great. But now you got jealous haters, Black people,
because she wasn't Black.
Because she was not genetically Black. She was pretending.
But she felt Black in her mind.
She felt Black in her mind, right? That's that's what in hood, that's what you call a wigger. You call a white nigga, right? But she was really doing a great job. I'm like, why are y'all jealous? And then once they got rid of her, didn't nobody step in the seat, right? Is that what happened?
No, that's not.
What the fuck happened after that?
They did, but they just, she just moved on. She left.
She moved on, but it's like, goddamn, motherfuckers.
Joelle, I just wanted to say.
She was a Caucasian ghetto flower.
I wanted to say this about, for you and your daughter, the fact that she wanted to be a princess, because once again, it goes back to who she is. Because just her wanting to be that, don't discourage her from her natural inclinations.
Right.
Because of society, because if that's who she is, then you have to talk to her about why she likes that and what that means to her, and then empower her to make her own choices and be courageous in whatever it is that she wants to do.
That's right.
Because it goes back to with me. Everything I've ever done has gone against my family values. However, it's okay because my mother encouraged me and she said, you know what? You're just ahead of your time. It's okay for you to like these things and to want to do these things. Because I think the biggest cause of mental illness is when parents do not allow their children to follow their natural inclinations.
Exactly.
And discuss it with them and ask them, why do you want to do this and what does that mean to you? Because just because society doesn't approve of things does not mean that you have to follow that. That's how we change the world. We change the world with the things that are given us within, because a lot of great inventions, a lot of things would never have happened in this world if people did not follow their natural inklings and their talents to be creative and to write books or to make stands. So maybe your daughter has the ability to change the world and your community, but you have to encourage her.
You can't limit it.
Own guidance.
Right.
I know. It's that line between protecting somebody, right? I didn't want her to get teased and feel less than, and maybe I'm projecting. It happened to me when I was in first grade. I think the first little boy I kissed was this little black boy at my school. And I got majorly teased for it. I mean, I got shut down and was made to feel a lot of shame. And that stuck with me. So, you want to protect your kid, but you got to let them go out there and change the world.
Smiling.
I like that.
What are you smiling at, Angela?
I'm smiling because it just reminded me of when you were saying that the first boy you kissed was a black boy in school. What the Klan would say is, if it's one thing worse than a nigga, it's a nigga lover.
What can I say? He was cute.
Yeah. Hey, do you guys mind if I'm going to single each of you out with a question that we had people call in with questions. And there was a lot of, this is a problem.
That's just horrible, ain't it?
Yeah. Wait, what did you say?
Leave it to Angelo.
Oh,
That's just horrible,
okay.
ain't it?
Yeah. Okay, so, and these are questions, a lot of listeners are white women, a handful. A lot of people are in different countries, so they're going to be learning a lot about American culture. And so, Angela, we'll give you the first one. Your thoughts on all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter. And if anybody else has something to say about it, please.
Oh man, I knew that was coming.
Listen as I go.
I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming.
Yeah.
Well, yes, all lives matter. Of course, all lives matter, right? But I know being a Black American in a white society, right? Black people and red and Latino and Indians have been the ones that have been lynched and killed the most, especially at the bottom of the social totem pole, right? There shouldn't be any bottom of any social totem pole for anybody to be at in the first place, okay? But because of this, this automatically gives this people who look like this their lives more important than anybody else that don't look like this.
Yeah.
So this is why I can definitely agree as a Black man, I can definitely agree to Black Lives Matter. Yes, all lives matter, but you don't really see any white lives being with a knee on their neck, or being hung by a rope, or being tormented or murdered in the street. You don't see any of that caught on camera. What you see caught on camera are Black lives being killed, and Latino lives more than anybody else.
Good answer.
Would that have ever happened? Oh, sorry. Would what happened to George Floyd, would that have ever happened to a white person?
No.
Not in that way.
Not that I've seen. Not that I have seen. If it has happened, I wouldn't know about it, because you don't get to see that type of shit if it goes down.
Well, I just want to say, when that white kid shot up that Black church,
yep,
and he was taken in handcuffs with a bulletproof vest, and when a Black person is selling cigarettes and he is choked to death, does that mean all lives matter? I'm gonna leave it like that.
Okay.
This guy killed how many people? Went in a church and gunned down 9 people in a church, and they treated him with respect.
With a bulletproof vest,
and arrested him and took him out to go to jail.
Went in the front door and right out the back.
A Black person is on the corner selling cigarettes. He gets choked to death. A Black person is accused of a forged $20 bill. Now, a white person, if that happened, they'd say, hey man, just give them the money for the cigarettes. You know, you don't yank somebody out of their car for a forged the $20. Right. You say, you know what? Let's settle this. You got 10. You got some other money. Pay the guy. Now, that's what would happen with a white person, but a Black person, 4 officers come, they yank him out the car, they arrest him for forgery. Like, think about that. That right there. The crime does not equal the punishment. You know, and that is where the problem is. When people say all lives matter, obviously it doesn't, because the crimes don't equal the punishment when you're a person of color, especially a Black man. And, you know, so here we are. Why are you saying all lives matter when you could do a crime as a white person and you're treated with respect and you're spoken to with respect, and a Black person is yanked out the car or forcibly face down
in handcuffs
over something minor? I was just looking today, this woman in Texas, the neighbor choked her son accused him of littering on his yard, and choked the son till the woman had to call the police on the neighbor. And when she called the police and was telling the police the story, the police officer arrested her and tased her and sent her and her daughter to jail. And she was the one who called the police.
Where did this happen?
In Texas. I was watching that this morning.
Damn.
You know, and so they went to jail for calling the police on the neighbor who choked her son. So all of that, when people talk about all lives matter, and Black lives. Nowadays, if you're Black, you can't even call the police because you think the police might arrest you or kill you because you called the police. And immediately, just because of your color, they're going to think that you are the perpetrator of the crime, and you're calling about it. Another story. To a family, they were protecting a store from loitering. From looters, and they were standing there because they were like, this is our store, you know, this guy, he's like, he serviced the community, been here for 40 years. My family, we're going to protect this store so the looters don't destroy the store. There was a newswoman there. She was a Hispanic, you know. They called the police passed by, you know, the people protecting the store. They flagged the police down. They come, and then they arrest the people that were protecting the store. And the newswoman had to say, no, they're not not the people. The people they ran. They went the other way. But she had to intervene with the police officers and vouch for them, saying that they were not the criminals. They were the ones who called the police. And they had already had all of them in handcuffs. So when people talk about Black Lives Matter, that's what they're talking about. Because you could, you know, Julianne and I could be together, and if someone called the police, they're gonna arrest me because of the color of my skin. And she'd have to vouch for me. So this is where we are a covert apartheid system. And that is what we're dealing with. And it's getting stronger and stronger now because of Obama and Black people feel like they've gotten too comfortable and feel like that we are rising up.
Marlene, you were agreeing with that.
I fully agree with that. And one of the pieces of data that I would point this person to who's asked this question is Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. When you look at African Americans are roughly 12 to 15% of this nation's population, but represent over 40% of this nation's prison population, you understand that it is Black lives that need to matter because we are disproportionately challenged, arrested, killed, and lynched in multiple ways than white. And I think this is why Black Lives Matter needs to be the hallmark. Yes, all lives matter, because I don't want any other race facing what we have faced. But what we have faced has to stop.
It's a unanimous answer, and the coined phrase Black Lives Matter bothers a lot of people. I thought about it last week, and I said there's a lot of white folks that can't even say Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of white folks that can't even say the word Black because they don't even feel comfortable saying the word Black. They think they're going to offend someone.
Right.
They don't know what to call us. Are we African American? Like, because they don't know how to refer to us, they won't refer to us. They won't say anything because they're just unsure.
Mm-hmm.
What we're saying is Black lives matter too. Black lives also matter. Black lives matter as well.
As well, right.
But we coined it to truncate it and just said Black lives matter.
To make a point.
To make a point, you know, hold up. That brings me back to this.
Need that shirt.
And that shirt. Now, you know, for a minute, as I remember a couple guys in my band, they were like, Angelo, or we can't say fuck racism because fuck racism is too offensive and it's gonna turn people away. So we at one point we redesigned the shirt to say, we redesigned the shirt to say like no more racism or something lighter than this, something lighter than fuck, right? And I was like, no, man, no. We need to say fuck racism because first of all, you got a lot of hard-headed people out there, right? Unless you get in their face and say, fuck racism, that narrows it in.
Yeah.
There's only one way you can look at the word fuck. Fuck is a negative exclamation point, right? There's no way around that shit. If you give them any kind of like room outside of that lane, then people can go, oh, it's okay. You know, it's all racism. There ain't nothing, man. It's all right. We can kind of get rid of it. Maybe we can no, fuck racism.
Hey,
now, when
Angelo.
I was on the George Clinton tour with Funkadelic, Fishbone, Funkadelic, Dumpster Funk, and Lady Velvet in the blue, Lady Velvet in the blue, something or other, I forget. I would go out there.
Lady Wolf and the Blue.
Lady Wolf and the Blue Velvet. So I would go out in the audience, right, with a flag that looked like this, but the pole was 10 feet tall, and the flag was 5 by 8 or maybe 10 feet long and 5 feet up and down, right? So I go out there and I wave this flag all around the audience, right? Walk around in the audience and waving this flag right before we go on stage, right? So I remember we were in Northern California at this venue and I was waving the flag. So the security comes up to me and he goes, "You can't do that." And I was like, "Why not?" "Well, that's I couldn't even remember the word he said after that. I don't even think he came up with a word. He said, that's not right. I'm like, of course it's right. Look at the whole phrase. Don't you feel the same way? Well, and then he got off his walkie-talkie and he had to say, "Well, you know, this guy's out here." I'm like, "Hey man, I'm the lead singer, man. You know, this is a part of the show."
I'm not going anywhere.
So, and all of a sudden, the crowd started booing. Boo, boo. The crowd started booing and shit. Then he got a call from his guy. He let him go ahead. He says, I'm like, "Thank you, man. Thank you." You know, we shook hands. I went ahead. You know, got grandma and grandpa taking pictures next to me on the flag, right? Then this other city we were in, the security told me to take the flag away, right? So I took the flag and I went ahead and I waved the flag on backstage and put it away. Then I got up on stage and I said, you know, I said to everybody, I said, "No, Angelo, you know, you can't do that because there's kids in the audience, right?" I'm like, "Okay." So I went on stage and I said, "Okay, all you kids out there, mom, dad, kids, you know, they just told me to put the fuck racism flag away." So, but we all know that there's racism in this country, right? And so we don't want our kids cursing. We don't want our kids to say fuck. But when it's something as bad as racism, and if your kids have been a victim of racism, right? I want y'all to stand up, whoever it may has been a victim of racism, right? So you got all these kids starting to stand up and shit. And I say, okay, look, it's not good to have your kids saying fuck, but you should be able to teach your kids to say fuck racism because we don't want racism to be in the picture anymore, just like cancer. Fuck cancer, fuck racism. And they all go, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Yeah, and fuck you if you don't like it." And everybody was going, "Yeah." And then we went to the first song and that was it.
That's beautiful.
Well,
How do you?
It's 12:42. We gotta go.
Okay,
Yeah.
can we end this on, and thank you. You guys are also amazing. You've had such wonderful voices. We've learned a lot. I wanted to ask 2 more questions. I'll ask them together, but tell me, whoever wants to answer, maybe we can make answers, I don't know. But
Quick answers and get out.
2 of the questions, which is kind of big, but what do you say to white people who are afraid to get into a dialogue like this with Black folks for fear of doing it wrong? Okay, that's one. The other one is okay. What can we do now? And what can we do that lasts?
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Let me address what we can do now. What we can do now, first of all, let me answer the first question. The first question is, what do we do if we want to get involved and we want to engage in conversation and we don't want to do it wrong? This is like anything else you learn. You cannot have fear of failure if you're going to succeed. So set it up so that you can be successful and own up to what you know and ask about what you need to know and be sure that you're learning the lesson of what you've learned. And then what do we change? We have to change nearly everything about what we're doing. From buying a home, the financial institutions have to change. They cannot be redlining neighborhoods any more than grocery stores can and still do. In some poor neighborhoods, you can't find a grocery store, but you can find a Popeye's chicken. Planning commissions have got to change what they're doing, and financial institutions have to change as well. Our political structure has to change. We cannot afford to have many of these people who are not signing legislation that needs to be signed and signing stuff that shouldn't be signed in our state, local, and national governance agencies. We need to vote. Voting is important. I think we've learned the lesson of why we need to vote. Voting is an act of a decision, but you got to be educated about the decision you're making. You don't vote for the cute guy because he may be a dumb guy. You don't vote for the pretty girl because she might not be the one you really want. You need to educate yourself about who and what you're voting for, because to do it any other way is to get what most of us don't like.
Yeah.
And yet we have a system that is set up where they can gerrymander districts and they can obstruct the right of people in this country to vote. We have been talking for a whole 3 years about the near constitutional crisis that is happening in Washington. And it keeps happening. And now we're down to nearly what I'm very worried about is that this country and this man are setting up a shadow government. A shadow government. When you bring people in who don't identify themselves, when you're militarizing the armed forces against its own people, this is the kind of stuff we see in other countries where there's a dictatorship or an authoritarian regime. And that's basically what we have. That has to change if we hope to create a structure that follows the value we say we have. Our values are acting every single day. And they stand up there and say, well, this is not our value. Then you better be operating on your value. What value is it? When you make a decision to pass a piece of legislation, who are you impacting disproportionately?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, everything has to change. And Black Lives Matter. And the structure of what we have is about to come down around our ears. And we're watching it happen. Person I think is in charge. You were talking about that, Antonio. Figureheads versus real heads of leadership. I believe it's Putin.
You say you believe it's what?
Putin.
Pootie.
Oh yeah, he's a shadow government.
Read the book Dark Towers.
Dark Towers.
Oh yeah, I heard
Right.
about that. Dark Towers.
By David Einrich. It follows the history of Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank is where Trump has been getting all his money.
Yeah.
Deutsche Bank is controlled by Russian oligarchs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You know why he doesn't want you to see his taxes?
Yeah, I can almost imagine. Oh my God.
I think he's made donations to the Ku Klux Klan and taken a tax credit for it. Yeah.
Oh, it's too much. Hey, does anybody else want to comment on those last two questions?
So
I do, but I'm gonna go after Michelle.
I wanted to say something about just in terms of white people and the person who asked the question. So first and foremost, okay, so this is what's happening to Black people. And now I want to address the white woman. So,
my goddamn turban at? Where's my turban? Give me my turban, man.
Shut up. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about how such a kid. Anyway, so Black Lives Matter, right? So let's talk about, I know you guys may have seen The Handmaid's Tale. Okay. So when it comes to power, and so this is what people have talked about, in terms of, think about your fears. Like, what are you really afraid of when it comes to Black people? Because it all starts with your own opinion and your own judgment when it comes to people of color. And I think that's where people have to start the conversation with themselves and their families. Like, in your family? What have you been told? What have you heard? What have you seen? Like, what has influenced your opinion when it comes to people of color? And then examine your fears. Examine, oh, when I see a person coming into my workplace, a person of color, and that person is my neighbor, am I getting anxiety? Am I starting to feel anxious because a Black person is in my office and sitting next to me?
Or two sitting together.
Two sitting together. Or when I go to a restaurant and they sit me beside a Black family, am I starting to feel anxious? Because that's where it all starts. Because that's your subconscious mind telling you to be fearful, your fight or flight response. So this is where it has to start with examining why you feel that way. And is that like an automatic negative thought or process that you have inherently placed in your subconscious mind, and it's in your DNA? And then you can start to change how you feel, because you're going to start noticing that it does not make sense for you to feel uncomfortable around people that you don't even know just because they showed up. Or you're standing, or the elevator thing. A Black guy comes in the elevator. Are you automatically nervous because, oh, here's 3 Black kids are in the elevator? Why am I so nervous about that? What does that mean to me? And once you start looking at that part of your behavior and how you are personally feeling about people of color, then you can start to heal from that. Because
so how
other
do you
than
feel? What do you do as an antithesis to feeling the fear with the 3 kids in the elevator?
Well, you start rationalizing it and you think about they're just kids. That's it.
Right.
They are just kids. And you can even say, well, what if they were, my suggestion is if you say, well, what if they were white kids?
Mm-hmm. Start a conversation with them. They're kids.
They're kids. Hey, how you guys doing today? What are you guys up to?
It's called
they're kids.
And relate to people.
Say that again,
it's called be kind and polite.
Right.
And strive to relate to people. Speak to people. Hi to people. Hello to people. Say nice things to people. Oh, you smell good. Pay compliments to people. We can do that with all people.
That's right.
All different colors. It's a practice. And guess what? It's a practice I've done all my life. Because part of it is I do it because it makes me feel more comfortable. Because when you meet a person or when you come across a person, there's like these barriers. It feels uncomfortable because you don't know them. So the easiest way to break down that barrier is be friendly. Speak to a person. Say hello. I know in the Black community, we're raised to speak to people all the time. That's why we say, what's up? How you doing? We acknowledge people. Black folks, if me and Michelle don't even know each other and we see each other, we'll have an acknowledgement with each other. And Angelo the same way. It's the way we're raised in our community. And part of that is what has saved our asses in the community, because when you speak to a person, you help to break down that barrier, or you find out right away, oh, there is a barrier. Because
that right there, man, that right there, dude. I told my daughter, I took my daughter and her friend when they was like 13 years old, 12 years old. I took them down to Skid Row. I said, let's go walk around Skid Row. They walk around there like this. They got their arms all pinched up. They got their shoulders all pinched up. I say, relax. Relax. Say hi. Say hi to people when they come down the street.
That's it.
Say hi to the fucking bum or the crazy lady. Otherwise, they're going to be like, oh, they think they're too good to say something to us. Right? And so that right there, I had to break that barrier with them really quick. I'm like, you say hi to the people in school when you go to school? Say hi to the people on the street.
So it seems like it's all about fear too. Everybody needs to just go out there and not be afraid to talk to people, because, maybe a white lady would say, I do want to say hi, but I don't want to come across as trying so hard. Like, oh, I need a Black friend. So I'm going to say hi, but then they're going to think that I must be racist. I'm trying to get over my racism. So I'm like, I need my token Black friend or whatever. You always hear this too, but it's like, get over yourself and just get out
But
there.
you cannot control someone else's response to you. You can only control your behavior and how you present yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And Joelle, you're not alone. We're all doing it. When I go into where I live, up here in Northern California, where it's mighty white, I will be the only black guy in an establishment. And I'll walk in there and I need to acknowledge people. And I'll hold the door for a gentleman if he's going in the bathroom and we're exchanging, and I'm kind and polite and I say, excuse me. And I acknowledge, hey, how you doing? And I don't know if I want to say, how you doing, bro, to a white boy. I don't know. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
But I put myself out there with the best intentions, and then you just let the cards fall where they will.
Oh, what it may, right? Yeah.
And that's just the reality of everyone everywhere. It's just going to happen.
Course.
But more times than none, people are going to respond to you in the same way you respond to them. You acknowledge them and speak kindly to them, smile at them, politely to them. That's mostly what you're going to get back. Some people.
That's the Bible phrase: "Do unto others as they would do unto you."
There it is.
Most people have good intentions,
I believe.
and that's the thing that we fail to realize. Most people are good people, and when we go around assuming that people are not, that's what you're going to get.
Assuming?
When you assume that people are not good people, you're going to get that because you're going to project that feeling of not being a good person or being judgmental. And so, it all starts within. That's how I feel. And I tell you, I've been in situations where I was in Denmark. They told me at a small town, and they said I was the first Black person they ever saw. And I was like, wow, it was crazy. And this was in the 90s. And I'm thinking, I'm the first Black person in your town.
You better represent well. You better do everything right.
And it was crazy, but it was just like, okay, I just went with it. I was like, okay, they asked me crazy questions about my hair and everything, and I just said, well, you don't know.
Yeah.
You've never seen a Black person before. I didn't feel uncomfortable, even though we were drinking wine at 8 a.m. That's weird. But
that helps to relax.
You know what's crazy? Trip over this, right? Trip over there. What's really crazy is, here's another fishbone story, right? So we going through Denver, Colorado, right? They got a racist thing. I know we got to go. I ain't got graduation. You need to give me my turban, motherfucker. I was starting to like that shit. So we're going through Denver, Colorado, and they got the skinhead thing going on up in Denver, right? All that shit disappears when the music comes on. When the music starts, ain't no nigga this and black motherfucker that. Everybody's on the floor in the mosh pit, hurting each other at the same time. And then once the show is over and everybody's outside, that's when the fights happen. And I was like, I had a really short affair with this Nazi girl in Denver. She had a mohawk. She had a bunch of skinhead friends. Oh, but she loved me. And I was like, so we getting it on in the back of the trailer, the motorhome.
Oh my God.
I'm waiting for the moral of the story because I know there is one.
Yeah, so I'm like, well, why the hell you with me? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about you are in a motorhome with a bunch of niggas? What are your skinhead friends? What are your skinhead brothers gonna say about that? Well, I'm just not going to tell them and everything. I'm not going to tell them, and I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever, but right then and there, I know that once the music came on, which is the music calms the savage beast, right? Music is the frequency. I've always said that language is the major threat and music is the minor threat. Because dictators, presidents, and all these rulers, they don't have no band behind them with pushing frequency, wind, and lights. Because that maneuvers people too, right? But you got language. So language is the thing that pushes people to go to war. peace, everything, right? You got all of that, right? But then that's the major threat. But then the minor threat, which is the music, that's the thing that moves your body. Because think about this, right? If you put a plate of water on top of a bass woofer, and then you turn the music on, that creates the waves in the water. When you put it on top of a bass woofer and then you got the music, you got the bass pumping, that moves the water, right? People are made out of majority of what?
Water.
Water, right. So if you moving your music right, you can move your people right. Then you got the words to go on top of it too.
That's powerful.
You got a motherfucker right there. So it all depends on, you know, like, you got to take responsibility. Like, as a musician and artist, you have to take responsibility of what you do on stage while the speakers are pushing that wind and the lights are blinking a certain way, right? And then you got the lyrics to go with it. Man, you can create tornadoes, waves, move mountains, all that stuff. Man, that's why the music business is as treacherous as it is.
Angelo, you have a beautiful,
maneuvering the elements.
can you close us out, Angelo, with a beautiful, you've got so many good poems and something that might be on topic. I think you had a couple. Can you think of anything that is a good poem that would kind of be on topic that would close us out?
Well, you know what? Okay, here's one I've been putting out there lately, and it's off of my Project Infidelica CD, and it's called Project Blackout. Project Blackout is what's been happening for the past 400 years, but they really put it in overdrive now because of you know, the Archie Bunker Joker they got as the fucking president now, right? So it's called Project Blackout. And we need to stop Project Blackout. But I'm gonna lay it on everybody just in case they never realize what's happening. All right, vacation time is over. You've had enough time to air your head out. We've been waiting for you here at the office, and the company will fail without you. So off with that stupid Moroccan outfit. Here's your suit and tie where you left it. Red and black genocide and ethnic cleansing. We got millions of dollars sunk in this fear-based investment. Your pinstripe suit of armor and your bulletproof vest, bottomless black credit card and God complex, and an endless access, and everything to withdraw from senseless murder down to straight up breaking the law. The Blue Klux Klan and the KKK posse prepared to kill darkies in La Raza. Don't you worry about a thing. If it's caught on camera phone, use your get out of jail free card and we'll escort you right back home. Well, black and red lives don't matter. Time to kill for the red, white, and blue. If you don't remember the oath you took, well, we sure do. And you swore it on the dollar bill and the Necronomicon. You said you didn't care how the peaceful white folks look. They're only pawns, sacrifices, and the beatdowns go on and on and on. Project Blackout. Project Blackout. Ah, Project Blackout. Snap out of it, man. Screw that hippie dip, patchouli, and beaded necklace. You've been living on the mountainside too long with the natives, and you're highly mistaken if you think education's gonna save them, because we're scared to death and full of fear, so we're killing what we don't understand that might be a threat to our men, women, and children. Causing a divide by hatred. Don't you know that love is the answer? And it's top shelf and sacred. It's the reason why we're here. It's the reason why we're living. It's the reason for the answer. That's why our hearts are beating. 545 in Congress on the inside. 300 million of USA on the outside. As long as we keep them from being smart, and as long as we keep them in the dark and keeping them all from being smart, saturating the airwaves with low frequency and debauchery and white privilege and prejudice and lack of education with Project Blackout. Project Blackout. Ah, Project Blackout. You always want to keep that free-spirited feeling. Don't let them turn your sky into a ceiling.
There you go.
This is Dr. Manvibe right here, your comprehensive lincologist, recommending that you arm yourself for the protective prophylactic coating of consciousness.
Thank you, Angela.
Peace out.
Thank you, Michelle.
That's beautiful.
Thank you, Mouse and Weens, for an opportunity to talk and educate and learn a little bit from each other. Thank you, Marlene, for making the time.
Right on. Thank you, Marlene.
Thank you both.
thank you,
It was
Joelle,
fabulous to meet
And
you.
Julianne and Ahmad.
Thank you, everybody. We are so honored to have you here. You're all such beautiful people and
Such
just
a
love
pleasure.
you to death. Everyone.
Such a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Practice and love for everyone, you guys.
That's right.
Yes. Enjoy your rest of your Sunday. Lovely meeting all of you. Marlene, I want
guys
some of
too.
those walnuts.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
Brain
We'll get you.
food.
We'll get you the hookup.
I'll figure out how to get them to you guys.
Nice.
Got me
Thank
some-
you so much,
saw
you guys.
Thank you
All
both, Joelle. Thank you both. Thank you, Ahmad, for the invitation.
For sure.
All right.
Have a good day, y'all. Bye-bye.
All right.
Love you
Bye-bye.
guys. Love you.
Bye.
Love you.
Thank you.
Bye.